So here's the thing about the nature of good and evil in The Good Place. The show, not the place. This show does an excellent job of dressing down the concept of good people and bad people, and showing through the complex world we live in that it is never really all that simple, and conceptualizing places where humans are punished for all eternity is kind of a disservice to humanity itself. The longer the seasons go on, the more you learn that no one is fundamentally good or bad, even if people monumentally suck, and that no one automatically deserves eternal paradise or eternal torture. It's one of the most optimistic depictions of the afterlife I've ever seen, and one that flat out, I just want to be true. Can this be a religion? This one's nice. I'd like to believe in it. From my perspective, no religions are real to me anyway, so I might as well just choose to believe in the kindest one that results in the least amount of cruelty and suffering for all involved. Wouldn't that be ideal? Rather than an eternity of your arms being peeled like bananas and your brain being batted about a stadium for sport? I don't know, just one man's opinion. One of the most extreme ways that they examine this is through Eleanor and the concept of survivalism. The first big issue that we address in this series about Eleanor is her selfishness, self-serving and conniving attitude to get whatever she wants, which paints a really comprehensible picture of how she treated others throughout her life and gets you to clearly understand why she's not really supposed to be in the good place, even though it's not really the good place. She treats everyone around her with little respect, and while she doesn't ask much from those she knows, she also expects to give nothing in return, even, basic niceties, which people will just generally give to you without asking.
We hang out after work because we're friends.
I know. It's weird.
If this is how you really feel, I think I have to fire you.
You need me to lie to old people and scare them into buying fake allergy medicine. I get it, man. Which one's my desk? And you guys don't have any lame mandatory office hangouts, right?
Hell no. Most days, you'll be able to avoid even talking to another person here.
Perfect. Happy to be a part of the not team.
When she makes a promise, she almost never keeps it, feeling little responsibility to the fellow humans around her. Though, we also know, of course, that she still has a conscience and is actively choosing the selfish path because it is easier for her, and after so many years, it has become second nature. However, we also get an intense depiction of how she basically had to raise herself, even emancipating from her parents and getting an apartment at a very young age. Her father was hardly present, and we don't even really get a clear picture of the type of man he was, mostly just ignoring Eleanor, smoking a blunt, and watching sports.
A fart in the shape of a man.
Meanwhile, her mother, who absolutely hates her father, is a self-absorbed alcoholic who is not even capable of taking care of a dog, let alone her own daughter. Also, she's always drinking wine with ice through a straw, so she's clearly unhinged. In fact, in a lot of ways, Eleanor learns a lot of behavior from her mom. That isn't to say that she didn't want their parents' love and attention, as every child naturally yearns for that, as we see in A Fractured Inheritance, where Eleanor lashes out in jealousy towards her mother's now stepdaughter. This selfishness and her ability to focus solely on her own pursuits is partly a defense mechanism for her tortured childhood. That doesn't make any of it right or okay, like Eleanor pretends like when she says it explains away her behavior in season 1, but it does definitely make it more understandable and in general help the audience to truly want her to overcome these demons. The world can often be unfair, and everyone can relate to feeling as if it's all against them, that they're on their own. She only ever relied on herself, and that inflated her ego to an intense degree, and also gave her an apathy for so-called moral behavior, as taking shortcuts was the only way she was able to provide for herself as a child. She takes the joy she can find whenever she finds it, no matter the responsibility that she has, like with her friend's now bulbous dog, or her relationships, where she leaves any man as soon as she stops having fun with a simple, "It's been real, dog."
Sorry, that's how I ended most of my serious relationships.
Yeah, that checks out.
She never even really makes any friends or does anything that teenagers are supposed to do, only relying on herself, which is incredibly lonely. It's easy to see how she spiraled down into the person that she was before she died. She really only ever expects the worst in people because the people who were supposed to love her the most mistreated her, and so she pushes everyone away before they can hurt her. That's her initial impulse. I mean, she straight up feels itchy the first time she admits her feelings for Chidi, and then she backpedals backpedals on it, even though that's not true. It's so wild. Even trying to admit that to these people who are generally nice to her is difficult because she spent so long inside this survivalist shell, basically on high alert for any relationship that might potentially hurt her. Or like the fact that when she needs a job, she goes to a low-level call center for fake medication aimed at the elderly, not really caring about how overtly wrong the business itself is, as opposed to a place where she'd actually have to talk and connect with those around her. It freaks her out, as her instinct is to be all by herself, not to put any trust in others, wall herself off in that cubicle. And to be fair, under capitalism, honestly, it's really difficult to work for a corporation that is not pretty goddamn terrible, or at least owned by a conglomerate that is terrible. And when jobs generally aren't owned by those big corporations, they don't pay enough. Equally important here, besides Eleanor's reaction to her childhood, is how difficult it can become to react to the world around us ethically. I mean, the most concrete example being near the end of season 2 and throughout season 3, as Eleanor is placed back on Earth with a big revelation, having just narrowly escaped death, but still struggles to maintain a healthy balance as the world continues to beat her down without reprieve. Now listen, the world is hard for everyone, and there are people in worse situations making better decisions than Eleanor does in this episode. But the reasons that Eleanor travels down these dark paths still cannot be overlooked. Dancing at Armageddon, Survivalism and Chaos in Modern Times is a book that really describes this concept that I'm speaking about well, especially under the perspective of America and widespread late-stage capitalism. It's mainly about those who are more extreme in their survivalist tendencies, building bunkers and weaponizing themselves and what have you, but Eleanor exhibits this behavior in, I believe, a different and more normal way. The author himself states that despite its overarching term in the mainstream media for these crazed bunker enthused people who want the world to end, survivalism is more common than most would think. The book posits that survivalism and extreme acts like that are a consequence of modern times and growing complexity. As we gain more physical understanding, we lose touch with the spiritual aspects of life. Faced with the growing power and complexity of modern institutions, the diminishing individual no longer hopes to comprehend or control even a fraction of the forces that surround him or her. That's a direct quote from the book. And it says, as a response, there are only a few reactions that humans realistically can take on. One is strictly and wholly conforming to the status quo, revoking your individuality completely and just basically bootlicking and hoping that it eventually trickles down to you. Or two, developing mental illnesses, committing crimes, and generally becoming apathetic to the world around you in a way that is destructive to yourself or others. And while I don't think that these two extremes are a response that every person has to take on in the world today, I do totally believe that we can find meaning in this really fucked up and chaotic world. It is definitely possible. I don't think either of them are irrational behaviors either for people to assume, and Eleanor shows this plainly in the episode Somewhere Else, as well as throughout season 3, where even with this near-death experience that will and did set her on the right path, eventually the complexity of modern life works its way back around, eating away at her determination, making her question what she's doing it all for, and forgetting the realization she came to in the first place that was so important. One small setback, and everything starts to spiral downwards so quickly, and it seems like the world is suddenly taking advantage of her, that none of this effort to live a full life pays off. Her friend even laughs at her when she's down. It's so heartbreaking to see, but incredibly realistic, and gives you so much context for why she would turn back to what she's used to. It takes Michael pushing her in the right direction for her to continue on this path. Sometimes that's all we really need, and I don't think we should fault anyone too hard for requiring that in this world that beats you back every chance it gets. We should be trying to help these people get better, because they're clearly capable of it. I mean, hell, in making this channel about, TV shows that I like and spreading positivity, I have experienced more homophobia than I did my entire life prior. And yeah, it made me want to quit at times. It made me think that perhaps I can't do this because of my orientation or because I have a feminine, maybe slightly shrill sounding voice. But then I got to look at so many more comments telling me that my videos were informative, fun, that I made a difference in someone's life. I even had people compliment my voice for for once, which, I mean, means the world to me still. All that reassurance, all that support, that helped keep me on the right track, not to spiral into self-loathing, just like Michael did for Eleanor by guiding her to Chidi, who is the one who will stick by her and support her through this crisis, keep her on the right track, provide guidance when she is feeling totally lost. And I hope, at the very least, my videos can be that support for one person. I mean, that is what we owe to each other, providing a sense of community, lifting each other up, treating each other with dignity as human beings, not as the enemy. But most importantly, these negative behaviors, traits that develop from this harsh world are tendencies that you can unlearn. Being benevolent and selfless are traits that you can work at just like any other, and can become second nature, even, eventually. When Chidi takes her under his wing and begins teaching her about ethics along with Michael, placing her in an environment essentially free of the complexity of modern life, having to earn money and pay for rent, and make enough to pay for rent, healthcare, just living, learning horrible things that depress you on the news every day, all the racism, the homophobia, a constant bombast of advertising. There's a lot to think about, really. But when she's free of all of it and forced to reckon with true morality, first, out of survival instinct, she's able to transition her drive to simply live to a drive to do right by those around her. I love her excitement when she finally does something genuinely kind without really thinking about it. It's, first of all, so adorable and shows that she actually wants to change. She actually wants to belong in this group for the first time in her entire existence. The one thing she had always struggled with. And by the time she reaches Mindy St. Clair, she is truly transformed as a person. Confronted with that survivalist ideology that she had subscribed to her entire life inside of Mindy herself, she was able to actively choose what was best for Tahani and Chidi, and convince Jason to do the right thing along with her as they were faced with Tahani and Chidi potentially being sent to the bad place if they didn't return. But Mindy advocated for her to stay, and Eleanor actively fought against that instinct. But I think also one of the best examples of how far she's come is in The Burrito, where she is the only member of the group who has grown enough to pass her own morality test, giving up her own selfish desires, and then subsequently pretends to have failed to make the rest of the group feel better, and so that she wouldn't be separated from them. I mean, by the end of season 2, Eleanor is able to look past her instincts that tell her to take the easy way out, do the hard thing, and be there for those she cares about, even if the consequences are literally eternal torture. Seriously, the stakes are always so high in this show that when people sacrifice themselves, it deserves a ton of praise. And then in season 3, she's even able to help her mother after discovering that she's still alive and overcoming her jealousy with regard to her new daughter, reassuring her that she is making the right decision, and although that she wants to run away from this growing responsibility, it is ultimately the best path for her forward and is helping her to become a more well-rounded and generous person. She is thinking of others for the first time in her life. She cares about running the PTO. Through her own development, she is able to help others, even those that her inner voice is screaming at her not to trust from everything that she experienced as a child. But thanks to the support of Chidi, Michael, Tahani, Jason, and Janet, and everything that she has learned in this show, she can work through this turmoil and truly make the right decision for both herself and her mother, who she previously had resigned to hate forever. And it proves this finally due to the fact that she eventually goes on to become perhaps the most important human in all of humanity, as she helps develop and personally runs the experiment that justifies their new system for trying to rehabilitate instead of punish those who lived poor lives. I'll discuss more about this idea of rehabilitation later. She puts everything on the line to make things better for all humans, even potentially giving up Chidi, the man she loves, having to puppet him after his memory is taken from him for the sake of the experiment. We see throughout the 4th season just how difficult this is for her, and how it emotionally takes a huge toll on her over time, and she often feels equipped. She often feels as if she isn't equipped for it, that she is still that Arizona dirtbag and wants to run away. But with a little help from Michael, she still resolves to go through it, and even run the experiment, because she knows it will improve lives in the future. Well, afterlives. Even if it's for people she will never meet with no connection to her personal survival, showing that she has extended doing this beyond self-preservation. It's such a beautiful arc with a very visible transition that is deliberately and tastefully done so that all of Eleanor's improvement feels completely earned and slowly developed over the course of the entire series, though she does make momentous leaps because where she starts and where she ends are quite different places. Another way the show examines all this is with with Chidi and the growing impossibility of actually truly ethical living, and how the morality that a lot of these philosophers spoke about sometimes can't exactly be applied one-to-one to your real life, as the world is more complicated than when these teachings were written and only grows more and more confusing by the day. Through the audience's eyes, Chidi is pretty clearly a extremely kind person who I'm sure many feel deserves happiness or paradise. However, in this world where there are so many problems in every industry, so many social issues that can be associated with every decision, including just buying a tomato, he becomes paralyzed at potentially causing harm with any option and ultimately struggles to live in any effective way, even hurting those close to him and pushing them away inadvertently. It's pretty damn relatable. I am that type of person that asks far too often if people are upset with me and then over-apologize, trying extensively to cover up potential issues that haven't even really happened yet, and in turn, annoying the people around me by repeatedly asking. And yes, it is definitely annoying, so that is why I am actually working on it. It's important to admit that. But his rigidity and adherence to philosophical teachings led him to be a very confusing person to be friends or acquaintances with. Like when he states that he missed his own mother's surgery because he promised some random kid he'd set up his iPhone. It results in these people that he loves not really trusting him to be able to make any tough decisions, even for their benefit, despite Chidi's care for them. And even resulted in his death, as he spent too long standing on a street corner deciding on what bar to go to with his friend, who was just telling him how impossible it was to be his friend when an air conditioner fell on his head. I mean, he struggles to even hold up little white lies, feeling immense guilt for every tiny thing that he does. So much so that he jeopardizes every friendship, every relationship he ever forms. It becomes impossible for him to even live normally. He can't make any choice because in our modern world, there's so much weight that goes into every decision, and you can't know how much harm you're causing by doing any one thing. As many people say, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. His explanation of the sound of a fork in the garbage disposal going around all the time in his brain makes so much sense and describes this feeling incredibly well. It's hard not to spin out in this day and age. I struggle with that every time I look at the news, which I unfortunately have to do now to keep updated on who's losing their rights in my country, but I'm getting much better at taking it. He wants to believe that there is always a best choice, something objectively correct, objectively the answer. It isn't until all of his memories are jammed into his head in the matter of microseconds that he realizes how frivolous his search for and drive to only do the right thing was. Eleanor helps him make sense of all of it. All you need to do is try to do right by those around you, your fellow humans, and look after those you truly care for. And stressing out about every possible thing that you need to do correctly is no way to live a life. Not only because you won't be able to enjoy any of it, but also because you're bound to neglect your truly important responsibilities. I like how Eleanor and Chidi are kind of two ends of a single spectrum, where Eleanor is extremely selfish, extremely self-centered, only thinks about how things will benefit her at first. Whereas Chidi is so concerned about others, so concerned with doing damage to the world, to people around him, that he ends up hurting them too. So what both of them had to do was take some behavior from each other. Eleanor had to teach Chidi to care about himself, take a break, go on vacation. You need those types of things to not spin out into oblivion. It's really important to strike a balance. Take care of those around you. Absolutely be supportive to your fellow humans, but also take care of yourself and don't blame yourself too heavily for some minor decision that won't really affect that many people negatively, like consuming almonds, as Chidi says. Yes, they are technically bad for the environment. There are lots of businesses that do things that are bad for the environment, and you not eating almonds, Chidi, would not alone have made a difference. I appreciate, pushing people to do the right thing, recycle, try to take care of our earth, but in reality, one person doing that obviously is not going to make a huge difference. We need to get these corporations to really stop doing it first. And we're getting there. We're starting. We might be taking a couple steps back right now, but we're gonna get there. I do believe it. Ultimately, what Chidi's arc is able to teach us is that we shouldn't put too much pressure on ourselves and take ourselves down to the point where we negatively impact our self-esteem and others others in the process just because we're not living completely ethically, as it's nearly impossible to do so 100%. We also get a close examination of Doug Forsett in season 3, who is trying his best to live as ethical as possible on Earth, but is still not making enough to get into the good place because of the system that has been set up. Yes, obviously that this is not real and is just used in context for forwarding the plot of the show, but I think it speaks to a really relevant point in today's day and age where it is impossible to live 100% ethically without supporting a single system that does some harm to the Earth. As we see, Doug Forsett is basically making himself insanely miserable, allowing people to take advantage of him, living off the grid, not being able to participate in society really in any meaningful way, just so he can get into the good place and live ethically, but that's not even possible for him, because even in doing so, he still can't get past all of the possible harm that he can cause others just by living his life. So ultimately, what Chidi's arc tells us is not to beat ourselves up for mistakes too harshly. Yes, we should try to be the best version of ourselves. At all times, we should never try to stop growing. We should analyze our mistakes, and we should definitely try to work on them. But it's also not the end of the world if you do make a mistake, and in fact, you are probably guaranteed to at least make a few mistakes in your life. That's part of being human. There is so much that we can't control. And another part of being human is accepting that that will happen. Now, this is not an excuse. Don't go being like, oh, well, I'm gonna make mistakes, so whatever, I don't gotta fucking care. No, that is not at all what I am saying here. Like I said, there's a balance between scrutinizing your behavior and living for yourself. One end of the spectrum is entirely selfish, and the other is entirely too benevolent, perhaps. But there is a place we could meet in the middle, where we care about ourselves and other people, and understand that some things are out of our control as an individual human. We can use whatever power we have to affect the change we can, but we can't beat ourselves up for not being able to change more. Another way the show demonstrates this condition is through Michael and the sheer power that humanity has over him. Even those in this world who are supposed to be evil, like Michael, who is a demon, literally designed to torture humans and to not feel empathy for them, succumbs to humanity and ends up aligning himself along with humans emotionally and eventually even physically becomes one, which was his greatest dream. It's a great mirror for Eleanor's story, who also feels that she was born to be terrible on Earth for a large part of the series and doesn't have any hope to develop into a supposed good person. Over the course of the experiment, though, Michael unknowingly develops connections with those around him, even if he didn't intend it to happen. In Janet and Michael, we see that this whole time, unbeknownst to him, Janet had been growing on him as a friend, even though he is aware of his position as an immortal demon that tortures humans, and Janet is not really a person. She's an anthropomorphized vessel for knowledge. That's what she's called. But he still feels connection to her, even if he resolved not to admit it at first, because, that's not what he's quote-unquote supposed to be, supposed to feel. In Existential Crisis, though, Michael takes his first voluntary step in doing concrete work to understand the very nature of humanity after being forced, like Eleanor did, to align himself with the right side out of survival instinct at first, but eventually for real. This leads him to this first important step, i.e. him realizing that he doesn't have all the time in the universe to do what he wants, to reckon with his feelings, to potentially forget everything that he's done. And he struggles greatly with this realization that it is even possible for him not to exist, trying his best to avoid those thoughts instead of processing them.
I know what you're thinking. Birth is a curse and existence is a prison. But don't think about that. Don't be sad, you guys. Focus on something great like Drakkar Noir. Woo!
Eleanor is able to reassure him that that's simply the way existing as a human goes. We all deal with it, and we continue living. It's not a great or overtly positive thought, but it does give you more value to the time that you do have. Do what you can while you can do it. As they discover later on in The Good Place, where people feel as if there's no meaning and no reason to continue or do anything and kind of just become this husk because they live in perfection forever. It only has meaning if there's a way out. if it's finite. And then Michael moves further in the trolley problem after he reverts to his instincts and tortures Chidi in a really violent way, I might add. Like, this psychologically would scar anyone, but here he learns how to actually reflect on what he's done and make up for it, without flashy gifts or grand gestures. His apology to Chidi is extremely heartfelt, and you can tell that he truly means what he's saying, even if he just recited the exact thing he said mockingly. He proves all of this definitively after Sean gives him everything he could possibly want, and he still chooses to protect the humans and those people who are now his close friends in Leap to Faith. However, his most relevant step forward, in my opinion, is in Rhonda, Diana, Jake, and Trent, when he voluntarily gives up his own life to save Eleanor and give her some chance of getting into the good place. Previously, in season 2, he had been doing a lot of great work to develop his emotional connections, maturity, and ability to truly care for others, but there is a through line of him hoping to get into the good place as well. Self-preservation out of fear for Vicky threatening his position, and Sean forcing him to retire, which, as we know, isn't true goodwill because it's derived from selfish pursuits. And he eventually goes to extreme lengths for these humans that he had previously resolved to torture for eternity. Like, forget sacrificing himself, he starts breaking universal laws because he cares about these people so much. He's developed human connections out of care for those other people, not out of self-preservation. He literally changed his nature in the most intense way of any of these characters, I would say, and is a great symbol for what the show is really all about, that no one is above rehabilitation and no one is too far gone. I don't believe in broken people, I believe in broken systems. And along these lines, even Sean, who is the ultimate demon, antagonist, and downright naughty bitch for this series, feels kinship with Michael in the end and tries to prolong their game in season 4 in an attempt to keep his friend around. It is honestly such good writing and one of my favorite choices. No one is one thing, and after all this time, this demon who resolved to torture our protagonists, at the end of the day, developed a sort of positive connection that he ultimately didn't want to see end, even if that meant they'd both lose. But Michael is able to see this and convince him even to do the right thing for the universe. It's such a great moment and shows that everyone is capable of great change, of developing genuine emotion, of showing kindness, even if Sean doesn't fully go in the other direction. I do believe that these demons who are involved in the new system, not directly physically torturing humans through all these mental tests, would eventually learn something about themselves as well, and would grow less sadistic, have less of a penchant for torture. Another important character that kind of disrupts these notions of goodness in our world is Tahani, and the concept of false motivation in The Good Place. Tahani Al-Jamil was born into a family with ginormous expectations for their children. Her parents rarely gave her the time of day, instead turning all of their attention to her sister, who seemed to effortlessly glide through life and triumph over any accomplishment Tahani made in every way, ultimately overshadowing her completely and consistently. As a result, she's completely obsessed with her image and her position in other people's eyes. I mean, it's extremely obvious from the way she behaves, constantly name-dropping and trying to prop herself up to be some sort of unbeatable, beautiful icon that is on top of everyone and never has a low emotional moment because her life is so amazing and perfect. But inside, she really has a super low sense of self-worth. So this is how she's able to cope with that negative perception that she has swirling around deep down and try to avoid those dark thoughts that seek to pervade her psyche. It's great how they're able to portray this before the eventual reveal that she isn't actually in the good place, with her trying to overcompensate for her underwhelming ranking when she accidentally, completely intentional by Michael, sees it in season 1. She becomes hellbent on improving her position and balances this addition to her negative self-esteem by being even more forcefully kind than usual, though it doesn't do anything to improve her position, of course. 1, because her motivation is skewed, and 2, because at this point, the system stops counting your points after your death. And it's something that she continues to struggle with throughout the entire series, through every reboot. She needs that huge house, those glamorous gowns, that perfect perception to be able to go throughout her day, to get out of bed. In The Burrito, she can't even overcome her desire to impress her parents and goes through the door to hear what they're saying about her against the judge's advice. But through this failure, she does learn to overcome them. After sacrificing so much knowingly to hear their opinion and listening to them still talk about Camilla, she's finally able to realize that there is nothing she could have possibly possibly done during her life to earn their approval. They have themselves to work on as their own persons, and she needs to be okay with who she is as a person, not always aspiring to impress everyone around her, because ultimately that's just impossible. I'm glad that we get to see her parents completing the new system and entering the afterlife, embracing their children and realizing their mistakes. Again, it shows that there really are no villains in all this, just people who need to learn the error of their ways. And when presented with that opportunity, or rather forced to confront it, the family can finally be happy. Isn't that so much better than the parents just being sent to hell, whatever your conception of hell is? They went through that and ended up on the other end better for it. And I really appreciate this show for even depicting that these people who have harmed us, our parents who were perhaps unhappy themselves, can still rehabilitate just as we can. Her biggest leap forward, though, probably comes from a fractured inheritance. This is such a good episode, by the way, one of my favorites, where in this episode she's actually able to make peace with her sister, understanding that while she seemed to easily succeed, she still went through the same types of hardships Tahani endured, just in a slightly different position. Her parents forcing them both to be amazing, spectacular, that being the only thing that gives her worth, and in turn pushes her away from Tahani, her sister, who, despite appearances, she really does love and care for. Their parents are just making them compete for attention, so it gets outwardly adversarial. It's really sad. I mean, Camilla just had immense pressure put upon her. I mean, once again, it's incredibly textured writing to make Camilla more human and understandable and not just this perfect pop star. Previously, she seemed almost ethereal and kind of downright rude, but that's because we saw everything from Tahani's perspective. Giving us a bit of Camilla's demonstrates that there are more levels to her than we thought, and we shouldn't just hate her, as Tahani does for most of the series, for being seemingly perfect and condescending. She feels she needs to be that way to earn her parents' love, but she doesn't truly want to be. And that pressure is its own type of punishment, honestly. And Tahani's ability to empathize with this struggle and subsequently overcome her desire to compete with her sister and perhaps everyone else in her life is a huge signal that she has moved past this vapid motivation that she previously endorsed for all of her charities. Because those we think of as good people aren't always wholly moral. No matter how much they signal their virtuousness, they could just be doing it for their own selfish reasons, like Tahani used to be. But once she's able to understand her sister and overcome this, she becomes a truly virtuous person and does things to help people solely because she wants to genuinely help other humans, not for any boosting of her own social status. Tahani becoming an architect for the afterlife is an incredible end to her arc, with her resolving to truly help other people for no notoriety whatsoever. She wouldn't even meet the people in her neighborhood. She'd just be designing them to help those who have passed on better themselves, not expecting anything from them in return, and most importantly, not needing others to feed into her sense of self-worth, finding her true purpose and deriving value from that rather than pomp and praise. Another important aspect of this show is Jason and victims of circumstance. It is so worth noting that with Jason, he is just not that bright. I mean, for a lot of the series, he has a fundamental problem understanding literally anything that is going on. Eleanor once referred to him as
literally the dumbest person I've ever met.
And who am I? Describe me now.
Of course, this actually lends itself kind of well to him becoming an actual monk by the end of the series, walking, watching, just existing for centuries by himself, not speaking or doing anything in particular, and allowing his mind to go completely blank with no worldly desires attaching him. I think this might have been a little bit easier for him to do because he doesn't have that many thoughts in the first place. Again, I love him so much, but it is worth noting. And then though, you hear about his life in Jacksonville, and it sounds like an actual nightmare of a childhood, which, you know, sounds pretty accurate to Jacksonville, Florida.
Jason, growing up in Jacksonville, what did you do for fun after school every day?
Me and my friends whipped empty spray paint cans at flamingos.
You know, I don't think I've ever asked you where you were educated.
I went to Leonard Skinner High School in Northeast Jacksonville, which was really just a bunch of tugboats tied together. They were tied together in a junkyard. It wasn't a very good school. For most of my classes, we just sold dirty magazines door to door.
You know, Jason, every single detail about your life is deeply disturbing.
I have no idea how it happened, but there is definitely a tattoo on my butt that says Jason.
It's like I knew this girl, Sheila. She was a black market alligator dealer with a pierced jawbone. We should all meet up in Jacksonville. My house is right on the water, It didn't used to be, but the whole city is a swamp and it's sinking into the ocean.
Woo! Strong pitch, bud.
I'm gonna tell a story about my real favorite meal.
Which is?
The buffalo wings at Stupid Nick's Wing Dump in Canesville. Wings were free for ladies if they took their top off.
Oh, boy.
Where he had almost no support, no education, no chance to escape this cycle of crime that has pervaded his entire life. I mean, he calls his dad Donkey Doug, for Christ's sake. As Tahani puts it, every detail of Jason's life is deeply disturbing. Listen, Jason definitely has a problem with impulsiveness for sure, but how is he supposed to know the correct or socially correct route when he's had little to no guidance and an actual disaster of an education? He did not have a school. It was a boat that was grounded. Jesus Christ. It speaks a lot to those who have no access to responsible support in this world, no counsel to point them in the right direction and help them break from this cycle of crime that is really the only thing they can think of to sustain them. Jason is hilarious, but he's also straight up tragic. And in some cases, he can actually be really thoughtful, emotionally. And it makes you wonder, maybe with an education, Jason likely would have been able to make more informed decisions throughout his life. So when he meets those who actually can guide him in the right direction, you know, not Pillboy or Donkey Doug or, I don't know, the other 50 people in Dance Dance Resolution, and provide him with an alternate path, his conscience is able to finally get some work done. That voice telling him when he's doing something wrong or ridiculous, growing louder as he learns what the right thing actually is. And the picture between right and wrong gets much clearer. He learns how to be responsible and how not to listen to every impulse that pops into his brain. And he demonstrates that when he visits his father and Pillboy in season 3, trying to ensure that they both stay on the right path. Unfortunately, his father is not so willing to listen, but does indeed learn from Jason's selflessness, allowing himself to be arrested so Jason doesn't get in trouble himself. It's small, but it counts, and it points to the fact that they can learn. They just need a little guidance, even if this is literally his own child guiding him here. Jason still retains his fun, childlike wonder and his confidence in the last season, but is able to grow into a far more thoughtful and wise person in the process. He becomes ultimately more patient. He doesn't do the first thing that pops into his head because now he has lots of things that pop into his head. He's learned so much at this point. And even outside of all the main characters, there are definitely more notable examples in this series. Season 4 being filled with excellent smaller examples of characters who are stuck in their ways but can truly improve. And I'd say the most important one, and the one that definitely influenced my own opinion the most, being Brent Norwalk, the most thoroughly infuriating character in the entire show. Like, I could not stand this man. Outwardly sexist, racist, entitled, and just downright annoying. The only positive thing I can say about him is that he was never homophobic to John. I mean, we didn't see anything hinting at that, so that's a single box he has checked at being decent. But he mistreated pretty much everyone around him, and was the biggest problem for the experiment most of the time, refusing to admit his part in any problem that ever occurred, even when they tried to directly infer that him being there was incorrect, that he was supposed to be in the bad place, and then he took it in the other direction, assuming he was supposed to be in a better place. But despite all of this behavior that he exhibits pretty consistently throughout the first half of season 4, he is even able to finally realize that he himself is the problem, with every part of his life going wrong, and he doesn't have anyone else to blame, even apologizing to Chidi for how poorly he's treated him.
Oh, no. Look, Chidi, whatever happens next, I need to say this to you. All right, I am so sorry.
It takes him being directly told that he is going to hell for eternity for him to realize why that is the case. And it's realistic because his behavior isn't automatically reversed. At the end of the series, we see that he is still working to better himself in the trials and has to learn the respectful way to act, but he wants to and is actively learning.
Hang on. So you can never tell a woman to smile? What if she'd legitimately be prettier if she smiled? Aren't I helping her?
It's taking a really long forking time because he's a piece of shirt, but hey, he is working through it. And he has literally forever to get it right, is the great news. His apology and realization that his behavior even was wrong was only the first step in his arc of recovery, and it actually gives me comfort to see him learning the error of his ways and growing past this point, even if he hasn't mastered it quite yet. More comfort than if he was tortured in the bad place with the two-mouthed bears, bees with teeth, and butthole spiders. There's so many examples across the series. Listen, I understand that it's really easy to just hate people like this, with this blatant ignorance and an unwillingness to learn from anyone ever, and also consistently abuses their own power, and to want them to suffer for their mistakes and their treatment of others. And you definitely don't have a responsibility to indulge or fix them. I also, plenty of times throughout this season, felt the urge to just say, God, just lock this man in a prison and throw away the key. But that would never solve any problems. It never does. Fuck prison, by the way. Broken system, but that is a completely separate conversation. However, it is more realistic that these people only really get punishment and realize their wrongdoings in the afterlife because, you know, men like Brent, they don't really get held accountable in our world nowadays, especially not in America. But isn't it better for everyone, right? That he understands exactly what he's done wrong, how he's hurt people. I mean, if you can understand and grasp the gravity of that, truly grasp it as the system would make you do after so much time, that will be punishment enough. He has empathy now, and he can reckon with the actual weight of these mistakes. Plus, he can then go on and perhaps provide closure to those he's harmed in the afterlife, apologizing and demonstrating that he will never be a threat again, although I'm not sure about placing him in the same neighborhood as, you know, those women that he definitely abused. Probably not their idea of heaven, but still, I'm just postulating the positive effects of his behavior, and if any of them wanted closure, he could finally maybe help provide it for them by apologizing, which is something he never even considered doing in the human world. And this speaks to the beautiful, beautiful concept of rehabilitation over punishment. It's one thing that's really always bothered me about many religions, just the concept of hell and what it means for humanity, the permanence and unforgiving nature of it all, especially in many religions that preach forgiveness as a virtue. You know, even if in the Bible it's not this fiery place, although I'm pretty sure there is definitely a lake of fire described in there, just being abandoned, turned away for mistakes is just not something that I understand, especially when you could do so much more by rehabilitating these people who perhaps did not leave ethical lives. Follow these rules or else type stuff. And it is a form of punishment, being so viscerally forced to confront your own mistakes and be reminded of who you truly were as a person, in an objective sense. I know that it's definitely comforting for us to imagine that horrible people who committed really disgusting atrocities are burning in agony forever. But personally, it just puts a really negative spin on humanity's purpose in the long run, and it becomes really difficult to draw a stark line, especially when it comes to such obvious things like point values in The Good Place. You know, how is the person who is 2 points behind someone who is over the line less worthy of getting in? It makes more sense where in The Good Place, they learn to develop a system where no one is punished, where every life is treated equally and as if it has value. Yes, there is a chance that you will spend thousands of years in trials to attempt to better yourself. But the important thing is everyone, without exception, is granted that right equally. Plus, it still rewards those who lived benevolent lives on Earth by providing a shorter process of admission into the good place. So it doesn't make your time on Earth entirely worthless either. It speaks a lot to an issue we have in our real world today, where some people feel that there are those who aren't entitled to a fair trial, that deeming someone a criminal or other such labels simply means that they are no longer human. They should be locked away forever. They should be treated worse than everyone else, and they are not entitled to the same rights as every other human is. I just have generally never subscribed to that ideology. Yes, obviously, prisons as a concept are definitely necessary to keep dangerous people off of streets, but that's really not their only purpose. They should be about rehabilitating and ensuring that when these people go back on the streets, that they don't want to do this again. And there should be a suitable social safety net to protect these people so that crime doesn't have to be resorted to again once they get out, and they have equal opportunities even though they have made mistakes in their past. But unfortunately, our prisons and our countries don't really do any of this. It's not focused on rehabilitation, it's focused on punishing anyone who crosses the law, which confuses the idea of every life having value, every human life being precious, which is also something our country preaches quite often, but uses it in quite interesting ways, I would say. What The Good Place does perfectly is shows that nobody's a villain here. Even these people who have done terrible, awful things deserve, at the very least, the chance to do better. And yeah, if they are ultimately evil, which again, I'm not sure is really a thing, this system will have them in trials for eternity. When faced with eternity, I don't think the human psyche and our selfish desires on Earth would even hold up, but still. If someone is truly unredeemable, a lost cause, I hate saying it because I really don't believe it's true, they never do get into the good place. But they're also not exactly tortured as in face peeling, lava dunking, or eyeball popping. They are simply tortured with their own mistakes. They have to face who they are for the rest of eternity. And if they can never do that, they can never know true paradise. And I think that is a suitable punishment. Because again, it gives people the opportunity to learn and infinite time to do so that nobody is beyond reach of this system. It's just so benevolent. There's so little pain involved. I love it so much. Overall, The Good Place teaches us a lot about ourselves and about our fellow humans. We are all people. We all have emotions, and we all deserve true justice and fairness. What we need to do for each other while we are on Earth is provide adequate support, lift each other up as much as we can, and try to make sure that nobody feels alone so that they have to commit these crimes. They have to resort to this selfish behavior. They have to do these things because, while yes, the right decision is always technically available, when the world is made too difficult for them, they will jump at the chance to do the easy thing over the right thing. So all we can do is support each other, try to do the best we can as an individual, recognize that this world we live in is not perfect, that when you make a decision, yes, there are ethical consequences with everything, but you also have to prioritize being able to live and know how much you yourself can control. Spread the good you can, and don't spin out about what is beyond your personal control. And ultimately, nobody is beyond reach, and everybody deserves to have the chance to better themselves. We might not get it in our short lives here on Earth, but this presents an opportunity for a belief system that provides that chance for every human, no matter how horrible or selfish. And I think that being faced with their own behavior and learning from it does more ultimately to contribute to humanity's innate value, rather than resolving that some people are just bad and wrong and hopeless. There's no hope for them, and we should give up and just send them somewhere where we don't have to look at them. I think we should lead with compassion, even when somebody frustrates the fuck out of you. Yes, I know it is so hard, but trying to understand them, trying to help them, not to the point where you hurt yourself, that's the importance of that balance I was talking about earlier, I think is crucial for this day and age, especially with how hard it is to be a human. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you get all these videos before they come out on YouTube. You get the unedited essays so you can hear me mess up 1,000,003 times, and you get to vote on whatever you want to see on the channel. So it's a great way to get extra content for yourself, but also support this channel in the process, which means a lot to me. But also just viewing, liking, subscribing, doing all that wonderful stuff on YouTube also means a great deal, and I thank you so much for supporting me and this endeavor to spread positivity. Spread some positivity out there today. Tell someone they look nice, a stranger. It'll make their day. But I'll see you guys for the next video. Bye-bye!